Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Iowa State Cyclones Live here on the Voice of College Football Network. I'm your host, Levi Stevenson. We got a big week. Well, kind of. As spring ball goes, kind of a big week this week. A few different commitments, both out of the transfer portal and out of the high school ranks for Iowa State football to talk about. And obviously some losses in the portal, as there always are. And specifically of the high school commit we got is a very, very exciting prospect, both for this class and just for the future of Iowa State football as well. Talk a little about that, and if we have a little bit of time at the end, might talk a little bit about the proposed change by the NCAA to add a 5th year of eligibility to college athletes. That proposal was once thought to be a little bit of a pipe dream, but we've had a number of athletes with no eligibility left currently, jumping in the transfer portal. So that has sparked some belief that might happen again. So we'll talk a little bit about that and what that could mean for college football and college sports in general. But as always, if anybody that wants to jump in, if they've got something to say about Iowa State, anything like that, definitely appreciate anybody that wants to jump in and give their thoughts on the show on Iowa State football program, on just whatever we're talking about. Definitely appreciative of having anybody else that's in there for that. I got to put my logo up there. This is going to be one of those shows I would definitely encourage everybody to interact with. If you're not able to tune in this, definitely like, subscribe, comment, all that on YouTube. Helps our algorithm out a little bit, so we can get this out to more people, but also just helps create really fun conversation, because right now there's arguably never been a better time to be an Iowa State football fan. Or if you're not currently an Iowa State fan, there's never been a better time to join in and jump on the bandwagon. We'll be glad to have you. You won't find a fan base more welcoming of bandwagon fans than Iowa State fans. So a couple things we'll get going on. First up, I would say a couple people jump in the portal this week, but the most notable was linebacker Jack Sadowski. He will be leaving. I believe he's at 2 years of eligibility left. This was a name that I don't know if I'd actually brought it up as a possibility to transfer, or just is guys that might be looking for a new home. But this was always a guy I think that was on the table, just because of how deep the linebacker room is right now and how many people you've got coming back. This was, I would almost certainly guess, this is just simply a case of a guy finding out he's going to be too far down on the depth chart, and just going to go find some playing time. It's an interesting one. It's an interesting name specifically because Jack started as a true freshman at middle linebacker back in 2023, and played well for a true freshman. But I think over the last couple of years, he just hasn't developed, especially in pass coverage, I think, the way that you would have liked to see him, develop and to continue to improve, especially, like I said, in pass coverage. Certainly fine as a plug the gap type of linebacker at the middle linebacker spot, but Iowa State needs its linebackers to be effective in coverage. And that just wasn't his strong suit. He wasn't quite quick enough to be a sideline to sideline guy. And I think he just simply got buried on the depth chart behind guys like Caleb Bacon and Cale Brazina and Will McLaughlin. And even the freshman that played last year, because Jack Sadowski did get hurt last year. He was one of the many injured linebackers. So he's going to be buried by on those. Yeah, like I said, even those freshmen too, Bo Goodwin, Ryland Barnes, and you've got a couple freshmen coming in that are really interesting. You've got Mason Miller. You've got lots and lots of names in there. Carson Willich, if he can stay healthy. That he was going to be too far buried on the depth chart. It's hard to blame any college athlete at this point for transferring to just get some more playing time, because that's just kind of how the world works right now. And that's just, when you have essentially unlimited free transfers, it's difficult. It's difficult to hang on to guys and to turn them into truly developmental players anymore. And that's just kind of not how it works anymore. Got Dan the Diesel Freak in here saying, how's it going? Going good, my man. So, this is a loss, obviously, for Iowa State as far as depth goes. Because, I mean, he has still started a lot of games at Iowa State, has played good football in his career. But I've made this point in the show before. I've made it on our podcast with Wide, right? That I think Iowa State's injuries this past season have the blessing in disguise, or the silver lining, if you want to call it that, is that you have so many guys on the roster now that have not only played in games, but played a lot of snaps in those games, and a lot of them that have started games. You've got guys 9 deep on the roster right now that have started football games for Iowa State. So this was always probably going to be one of Iowa State's deepest position groups in terms of playing experience. You still, just after last season and how many linebackers went down, obviously you don't want to lose any more than you have to, because you know that sometimes the sky does fall and you have to just deal with it, and you have to come up with guys that can play different spots. And they really had to do that, but they're healthy now. Caleb Bacon should be healthy, mostly healthy. Will McLaughlin is much healthier. So you get John Closerman back and lots of different guys back as well. So, it's a loss in terms of depth. But is it, was he in the mix to become a starter? I would guess apparently not, because he is in the portal, obviously. So I don't think he was ever really in the mix to be a starter, just based on who's in front of him and what kind of experience there is in that room. And it also may be just the fact that the younger guys are starting to pass him up a little bit too, and he just decided to go get more snaps. Can't blame him too much, but you'd like to have him for depth, but sometimes it's just not how college football works anymore. We did have one other departure. It was named Drew Doyle. He was a long snapper here. It's kind of one of those. Long snapper, but is what it is. Don't really have too much to give on, too much insight to give on long snapper transfers, but we did have a couple commits last week. One guy we talked about last week, as visiting Iowa State, we thought had a pretty, there was a pretty good shot he would come to Iowa State, was Austin Barrett, who last week did indeed commit to the Cyclones. As I had hypothesized, and I think most people thought that was a pretty good chance that would happen. His brother Dylan plays at Iowa State. He's got good size. This is a guy that he's got a tackle body that could step in and potentially be in the mix right there at tackle right away. So it's a natural fit for Iowa State. Iowa State's got a number of players out of the Chicago area as well. So this makes a lot of sense. And this was a good get to replace one of the Helton twins that you did lose last week in the portal. And Iowa State also got a commitment from another lineman in Derek Jensen. So suddenly you have two young guys that have not played a whole lot. But you thought they might be in the rotation or might be in the mix anyways, and you lose them to the portal, and then you replace them with arguably two better players that are more equipped to jump in right away. Now, Derek has not played, he hasn't played a lot of college football or anything like that. He's still a young guy. But came out as a borderline 4-star prospect, one of the best linemen in Wisconsin. Came in, he transferred from Wisconsin. He played at Arrowhead High School, which this is kind of some college football sicko knowledge, but Arrowhead is one of the best programs in the state of Wisconsin. They are Wisconsin's Dowling, Southeast Polk, that kind of thing. They are that for the state of Wisconsin. It's an exceptionally good football program. They have produced a lot of good NFL players. Don't quote me on this one, but I believe Iowa State alumni AJ Klein is from Arrowhead as well. So good football pedigree there. Great size, 6'6", 314 is an awesome size. I think when you have Derek Jensen and Austin Barrett coming in, those are two guys that will immediately compete for a spot in the if not on the starting group, very quickly on the in the main rotation. I believe we'll see those guys figure in right away. And I would argue that this is an upgrade for Iowa State, from the Helton twins. That's not to knock the Helton twins, but they're still very young, and one of them was ahead of the other one. I should say. And, like I said, don't want to knock either of them. But, these are two guys. You have two, you replace two, you know, guys that are potential developmental players that might figure into the rotation to two guys that can immediately come in and factor into the rotation, potentially into the starting lineup. You know, overall, that's a good swap for Iowa State. That's a nice upgrade on the offensive line, and suddenly now you have most of your offensive line. If you assume that Derek Jensen and Austin Barrett are going to be, if you assume that they're starters, which maybe you can't assume that yet, but let's assume that Derek Jensen and Austin Barrett are starters. You've got those two. You've got Dylan Barrett, and you've got Tyler Miller. On there, and then really you're just looking, and then probably Brendan Black. Maybe I don't know. It depends on what Derek Jensen can do, if they want to put him at a tackle spot or if they think he's more of a guard, or I don't know, maybe they think he can be a center. 6'6" is pretty big to be a center. Maybe they think Brendan Black can be a center because he's a little bit smaller. Either way, you've got 4 linemen, potentially 5 linemen right there that you can be like, okay, these guys can immediately be in the running to take the starting snaps. Shout Steve. To me, to take starting snaps. And then you've also got, you've got James Neal on there, and you've got Jared Hufford. Or sorry, not Jared Hufford, Jim Boniface. You've got Jim Boniface in there. So you've got 7 guys in there that have started games, have played a lot of snaps, or will be in the rotation there. So, I mean, those 7 guys, if you can find a really good 5 out of those, I think that's a decent group that you can put together a decent line with. Now, I will not fall into the trap of being the type of person that hypes up Iowa State's offensive line in the offseason in April and May and saying that they're going to be the best offensive line of the Campbell era. I will not do that. We've all made that mistake one too many times, and it was only correct one time. As it can only be, that it's the line has been inconsistent at best since 2020. And we always get this in the offseason where this could be the best line of the Campbell era. They've really made great strides. They've done this and this. And sometimes they're fine. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're good. Sometimes they're not. And it's been mostly marked by inconsistency and a lack of push in the running game. Now, Ryan Clanton's been in the room for a while now. He's been the position coach for the offensive line for this would be his 3rd season, I believe. This is when you can really start seeing, I think you can really start seeing the fruits of your labor with this, in that, Brendan Black came in and played as a true freshman, because he was one of Clanton's guys, and came in and played as good as you can really ask a true freshman to play. And, he was fine last year, needs to grow some more, but now he's in his 3rd year in the program. And, Brendan can take a huge step forward, especially like in pass protection. And if he can do that, this is proof of concept that Ryan Clanton's got the juice for the offensive line. This is it's a proof of concept that his developmental program works, that his mentality of just being more physical than everybody else. It's proof that is an effective strategy at the Power 5 level. We know it was really good at UNI at the FCS level. Now we're going to get the proof of concept at the Power 5 level. And, part of it is recruiting. Part of it is hoping guys pan out. You would have liked the Helton twins to pan out. Fortunately, you've got replacements for them in the portal, which is good. But now you need to see, the year-ish that you spent developing the Helton twins is now down the toilet. So you lost that developmental time that could have been applied to somebody else. But, you did gain the developmental time from Wisconsin, Indiana, that they put, the time and effort they put into Derek and Austin, but does their developmental, does the hours that they spent developing Austin and Derek at their respective former programs, do those hours, are they a 1-to-1 effectiveness in your own scheme? How well do they fit in what you're trying to do with the offensive line? That's the big question. They've had a history of bringing in offensive line that have been good. Obviously, Jalen Travis was excellent last year, And, he came in as a fifth year senior. Now, is that a guy like that easier to bring in since, you'd recruit him out of high school, but then he was also, came from Princeton. He's a really smart guy, really talented guy that you could probably plug into just about any system and he'd be pretty good. Um, was that kind of that the case with him and he was just always going to work? Or, do these things take time and we just got to wait for one or both of these guys to click? You would assume that Austin Barrett has a decent shot at clicking because his brother played well last year. Dylan played well and can help his brother more quickly adapt to Iowa State's system, to their blocking scheme. You would assume that transfer and that whole acclimation process is made easier, having a brother there. But it remains to be seen. Sometimes some guys just, the light doesn't come on when they get to a new system. That it just happens. Isaiah Alston is a good example of that, where he maybe just spent too much time at Army and in the triple option and just never really got a hold of a more wide open spread type offense that runs air raid concepts. Maybe the air raid receiver concepts just never really clicked for him. Um, the catches he had in the Miami game were mostly deep balls down the sideline, stuff like that, where he could just kind of run in a straight line and go get it. So maybe that was his deal. And sometimes, the light just never came on for him. And sometimes that happens. And that's okay. It's not every guy has to fit into every system. But you hope that at least one of Derek and Austin, but obviously ideally both, should be able to integrate into Iowa State system and become a big factor in this rotation and in this starting lineup as we get through spring and get into fall camp. I would assume that these guys are probably not partaking in spring practices. I don't know that for sure, but I guess I would assume that they are not, but they would be here for spring work for summer workouts. So, obviously, overall, I think this is a really nice couple of grabs for Iowa State on the offensive line, to replace the Helton twins and really, frankly, to get an upgrade there and to immediately inject two guys into the roster that come from, Derek Jensen's obviously coming from a very good program in Wisconsin that has a history of kicking out good offensive linemen. And, Austin coming from an Indiana program that was very, very good last year. So a lot of hope there. I think there's reason to be optimistic. We'll just have to see and hope that this all works out for Iowa State. So a couple of nice grabs there in the portal for Iowa State. So the big news of the week, though, was Iowa State getting a commitment from 4-star quarterback Jett Thomala, which I just realized I forgot the second L in his last name. There we go. Jett Thomala. He was a 4-star quarterback out of Nebraska, which we talked a little bit about last week about how Iowa State is absolutely demolishing the state of Nebraska in the 2026 class. Jett Thomala was definitely the prize recruit of this class. And let me see here. Oh, I pulled it up on the wrong screen. Take it. There we go. Okay, so Jett Thomala, prize recruit of the class, 4-star quarterback. I believe he was an Elite 11 quarterback as well. He's got offers from everybody. We did see that he took an Ohio State offer, or took an Ohio State visit. I think it was a week or two ago. However much, there isn't an offer from them registered on here, but he did post on his social media that he did have that he had to go to visit to Columbus. So they were at least looking at him. He's got offers from some nice programs here. This is a guy, 6'4", $185. That's great size. He can put on 20 pounds of muscle. You put 10, 20, 30 pounds of muscle on over the next couple of years. Because he's gonna have 2 years to sit he's gonna have a full year. Once he gets here, he's gonna have a year to learn, get acclimated, put on a little bit of muscle and all that, in anticipation of Rocco leaving after the 26 season. Obviously short of him having a truly unbelievable season this year and going pro, which, even if Rocco has an unbelievable season, I don't know that he goes pro, unless he's going to be like a top 10 draft pick. But this is the Iowa State quarterback position is pretty much locked up for the next 2 seasons. Short, obviously short of an injury or Rocco just falling off a cliff production wise and all that. But even even if that happens too, they've got Connor Moberly there, and they will also have Alex Mansky, who is a freshman this year. So this is a guy that I would expect to be right in the mix when Rocco leaves after the 26th season. Now, factoring into that whole thing, if Connor Moberly is still here, which I don't have any reason to believe he is like, you know, imminent to leave. But he'll be a junior because he's a redshirt sophomore this coming season, I believe. And so he'll be older by the time Rocco is done. Let's see. I'm gonna just check here real quick because I believe Moberly is gonna be. I believe he would be a senior by the time Rocco is out of here. So Connor Moberly is okay. So he's actually just a redshirt freshman. I don't know why I thought he was older than that. Because Rocco's a redshirt junior. Yeah. Okay. So Moberly is only a redshirt freshman this season. That was just his redshirt season. So he'll be a redshirt. So he'll have redshirt sophomore next year. He'll be a redshirt junior going into the 27 season when Rocco has graduated. So he'll be a little bit further along in his career. And assuming he's still here, which maybe he is, maybe he isn't. That's just, like I said, that's just kind of how college football works now. Is if guys don't think they're going to get snaps, they leave, or if they're just getting bored, they leave. Whatever it is. I don't know I don't have any reason to believe that Connor Moberly is getting ready to leave or anything, but assuming he's there, and then you have Alex Mansky, who I know I've gushed about in the past. I don't know if I have on this show. I definitely have on the Wide Right shows. I'm a big believer in Alex Mansky. I think he's got a great physical build. If you watch his tape, he throws a really nice ball, especially a nice deep ball down the field. I think he has a lot of potential at Iowa State to be the starter in 27. And now you have a guy that you're bringing in to the mix in Jett Thomala, I'm not sure, that is talented enough to absolutely give Connor Moberly and Alex Mansky a run for their money. And I think this is fantastic for Iowa State. Because even if, let's say, Iowa State goes the route you kind of assume that they will, where they go with the veteran in Connor Moberly. If you go with the veteran in Connor Moberly, he'll have 2 years, and then Alex Mansky will still be he'll still be fairly young, and Jett Thomala will still be young as well. So those guys will still be around. Jett Thomala would just be a redshirt sophomore going into when Connor Moberly graduates. So this is absolutely one of the guys, along with Alex Mansky, that has a chance to be the quarterback of the future for Iowa State. I guess quarterback of the future post Rocco. Rocco is still the quarterback of the future right now for Iowa State because he's got 2 years left. But this is absolutely a guy that's potentially next in line after Rocco if he can outpace Connor Moberly in camp and all that. So an exciting name, 4-star quarterback. You love to see that, especially when they've got a good platform like this. Iowa State's gotten good quarterbacks before. Obviously J.J. Cole is the famous one where he was very highly rated. But and throws it, threw a good ball, but maybe wasn't as mobile and just wasn't ready. Jett Thomala, to me, just based on his tape, and actually we can pull up a little bit of his tape here. If you give me 1 second, let me pull up his whoopsies. I've got his huddle highlights pulled up here, which obviously they're just highlights. You can't really read too much into them, but he's mobile enough to be dangerous, but he just stands tall, finds his ball. I mean, that's a beautiful deep ball right there. So you like his size there? He's got decent footwork. He's mobile, keeping his eyes downfield. Makes a beautiful throw to that receiver on the post route there. And again, like I said, these are highlights. They're gonna look good. But you like him there, staying calm, finding his guy downfield. Beautiful ball right in the breadbasket. I mean, you love that. You love seeing this out of high school guys that have really great mechanics. And he's just a good player, man. Um, his tape looks different to me than like JJ Cole's did. And like I said, I'm not trying to like disparage JJ Cole because he didn't work out here, but um, his tape, JJ's tape looked a little bit more like had more question marks on whether or not this like his size and his ability would transfer to the collegiate level, just because he was kind of just built like a deer basically. He's very tall, very lanky, and you wonder what his mobility would look like and all that. um there's really, I don't see any concern as far as that goes here with Jet. He stands tall, he's got good footwork, he gets a good base under him. He's got good mechanics, he's got a good release. It's like it's not overly long or anything like that. Um, yeah, you're seeing a lot of deep balls here just because they're gonna throw that on the highlights. But look at that. I mean, that's nice touch on that. A lot of young quarterbacks would be tempted to just rip one of them, but he puts beautiful touch on some of these, and it's not like the receivers are having to make big body adjustments to any of these. I mean, they're just right where they need to be. He's accurate. He's got a decent arm. He's got a solid arm. He's mobile. He's not gonna burn you. He's not gonna run for 100 yards in a game, but he's absolutely mobile enough to extend plays. And if he needs to get out of the pocket and pick up 5 yards, he can absolutely do that. But kid's just accurate. That's a tough ball. That back shoulder fade there. That's a tough ball. That sideline ball. That's not an easy throw. Um, Gosh, see, that's a nice play there too. He's just keeping his head up, making a good play, just getting a few yards and moving on to the next one. Nice pocket presence there, spins out of it, finds a guy downfield. Kind of a busted play, but keeping your composure and keeping an eye downfield so you can keep a look at that again. That's just good heady play. Nice ball there. Could argue that was maybe a little bit risky, just because he gave it a lot of air when that defender wasn't that far away. But nice back shoulder fade there. Gosh, only his receiver could catch that. These are beautiful passes. Just love watching this guy's tape. I'm not going to sit here and just gush over him for 20 minutes, but I think Jett Thomala is a really, really nice quarterback. And I think Iowa State fans are going to really like him if again, he's got to put it together. The same rules for freshmen go for, that same rules that go for transfers go for freshmen too. Is that's, you can evaluate the hell out of a guy and see talent. You can see that he comes from a good program. And in the end, it's you got to get him to fit. You got to teach him how to fit into your system. And sometimes guys work out and sometimes don't. Iowa State's had guys in the past that we thought were basically guaranteed to work out. JJ Cole, I don't know if he was guaranteed, retrospectively, I don't know if we should have thought he was guaranteed to if he was guaranteed to work out or anything like that, just because Iowa State typically does best when it has, Matt Campbell's teams typically do best when they have a quarterback that is mobile and can extend plays. And that's just not really in JJ's skill set. But you go back, like Rocco's obviously done what he's done, and he's been a very good mobile quarterback. Brock Purdy was Brock Purdy. And, previous to that, Iowa State's been at their best when they've had a quarterback that can make plays, when they can make plays with their feet. So it's an interesting one. I like this player a lot. I think he's going to be in the mix in 27 to potentially compete for that starting spot. And like I said, even if Connor Moberly gets that, he will just sit around, sit for a couple years, and he'll be a redshirt sophomore with 3 years to play in 27. And another shot to win that starting job. So big time pickup there for Iowa State with 4-star quarterback Jett Thomala. And as we've mentioned before, Iowa State is continuing to put together a nice class of 2026, specifically geared around the state of Nebraska. And right now, I think Iowa State is currently going to be on pace to get potentially 9 of the top 10 recruits in the state. I know there's a couple Nebraska. I know there's a couple Nebraska crystal balls here, but I know Isaac Jensen is a big time target for Iowa State at the tight end position. We Iowa State's got its own in-state tight end and Mike Jacobson's younger brother, um, but he might be too high ranked for Iowa State to pull in. He's got Notre Dame offers and things like that, and it's hard to argue with a high end tight end going to Notre Dame. They put him in the NFL all the time. So this is the guy I've heard that if obviously if they can get Jacobson, great. But they really like Isaac Jensen from what I understand, and I think they're really going to go after him. Like I said, I know he's got a crystal ball to Nebraska here, but I think Iowa State is right in the mix here, and I think they would love to pair him up with his high school teammate in Jett Thomala, where it's worth noting here, Millard South, Millard South, Millard South, Millard South. I would say it's already got two guys from Millard South and are looking at getting this third one. I don't know if he's impending to commit or anything like that, but what I know is you should keep an eye on Isaac Jensen as potentially being another one in this class from the state of Nebraska. Darian Jones, again, another guy that's got a crystal ball to Nebraska, but the Nebraska writers on this site typically just kind of give good recruits in Nebraska to the Huskers without really doing too much homework. He's got visits scheduled obviously throughout the summer. I would say it's definitely in the mix here. I don't know if I would say it's in a clubhouse leader or anything like that. Obviously, you've got Iowa and Kansas State there. You've got other good football programs there. So we'll see. We'll see if they can pull him in. But tons of guys out of the Omaha area here, out of the Lincoln area. Leighton Burback, he's got an Iowa State offer. I don't know for sure. Northwestern's right there. I don't know for sure exactly. If how close Iowa State is on him. Darian Jones, like I said, Leighton and Darian Jones are the two guys. I'm not 100% sure exactly how close Iowa State is, if they're just in the mix or if they're one of the leaders right now. I'm not 100% sure there. But from what I understand is that Iowa State does have a good chance to land both of them, or at least a solid enough chance. And I think Isaac Jensen is the one that I would look at as being the one that Iowa State has the best chance out of those three. But I would say absolutely could land all three of Isaac Jensen, Leighton Burback, and Darian Jones, and essentially taking 9 of the top 10 players in the state of Nebraska for the class of 26. And of course, when Jett Thomala, when he committed, there was all sorts of Nebraska fans like, "Oh, Nebraska never offered him." La la la. It's like, yeah, we know Nebraska never offered him because Matt Rule said he's not going to offer high school kids unless they're like 5-star unless they're like 5-star players. And we're going to find out if that works out for him, because he's, he went on this long tirade about how the Big 12 is just, the Big 10 and the SEC is just a different game, and that, the Big 12, the desperate teams set the market and all this. It essentially spent an entire time putting down the Big 12 as a lesser league and all this, which is pretty standard on brand for Matt Rule. He has had a long history of being an extremely unlikable person. I know he and Matt Campbell is no fan of his, as demonstrated by that very icy handshake after the Baylor game back in, I want to say it was 2021 or 2019. Matt Rule is not a person I'm looking at as being one of the nice guys in college football. Also, one of maybe the more overrated coaches in college football. I think he did a nice job at Baylor. He did a great job rebuilding at Baylor, I should say. He did do that. He earned that respect. But I also believe that I'm not a believer that he's going to turn Nebraska into any sort of winner. Nebraska is objectively the inferior football team over the last decade to Iowa State. It's not even close. The statistics bear that out in virtually every single way possible. There's right now, even if Nebraska was offering in-state kids right now, I was, aside from the money part of it, like specifically just the dollars and cents on the check, Iowa State is the more attractive football program right now. They have more momentum. They have the results on the field bear it out that Iowa State is a better football program than Nebraska right now. And it's not really arguable. there's no argument for Nebraska as being the better football program of the last decade. So I'm not sure what Matt Rule's thought is. He's like, I'm worried. He says, I'm worried about what Ohio State and Michigan are doing. Buddy, you should be worried about Ohio and Western Michigan. You got to beat those guys first. They struggle to beat mediocre teams. Yeah, they yeah, they beat Colorado and all that last year. But I mean, Nebraska's got to start worrying about teams that are on their own level before they start talking about trying to compete with blue bloods, because Nebraska's just not there. They haven't been there for 20 years. So I'm not sure what Matt Rule's smoking. He's taking a huge gamble by just essentially ignoring high school recruiting and going after the transfer portal and trying to win exclusively through the transfer portal. He's taking a huge gamble. I don't think it's going to pay off for him. Frankly, I hope it doesn't. I really hope he doesn't. I don't think Matt Rule is a nice person. I don't think Nebraska is a football program that I care about. Frankly, I'm kind of hoping Matt Rule fails, to be honest, which I know that might sound mean-spirited, but that's just kind of where I'm at. Iowa State's had a long-standing rivalry with Nebraska, and we also don't like Matt Rule. So, Iowa State is perfectly happy to take as many good recruits from the state of Nebraska as the Huskers will hand over to them. And hopefully they can get all 9 there. So we've got a little bit of time left. So I think it is worth talking about the NCAA's, the potential new house settlement coming out, and the thought that the NCAA could be adding a 5th year of eligibility. This was brought back up again this week by a flurry of college athletes that are they're completely out of eligibility, but have entered their name into the transfer portal. And they were advised to do so. A few notable ones: Zeke Mayo from Kansas, basketball player, even put in their tweet that they were advised to enter the transfer portal, based on impending lawsuits and things like that, but that they're still doing this. And the reason they're doing this is because there is a belief now that the NCAA, that the house settlement would go in the direction that the NCAA will undergo major reform, and that a 5th year of eligibility would be entered. So instead of having 4 to play 5, you get 5 to play 5. And it opens up a whole can of worms. But this was the 5th year of eligibility was kind of a pie in the sky thing in January. There was reports that it was dead and that it was just not happening. But now when you have all these guys entering the transfer portal and under advisement from agents and things like that, who are definitely going to be connected to what's happening with the house settlement and all that, it's worth noting that maybe this has momentum. Now, the 5th year of eligibility, we can look at and understand that this is going to cause a few problems, more than a few. It's going to cause a lot of the same problems that the COVID year caused. And we are still reeling from the effects of the COVID year. We're finally seeing the end of them as far as guys that have COVID years available. I believe Tyler Miller at Iowa State has got to be one of the last people in the NCAA that has their COVID year available. And he's using it this year. It caused lots of chaos in rosters for a number of reasons. Because one, you had guys that hanging around longer, hanging around on teams longer than they were expected, which throws off recruiting cycles, because now you just don't have guys leaving that you thought were going to leave, which means that you may end up with surpluses at certain positions of players, and you just can't find the time to develop them or find the time to get them on the field. That causes problems. Because when you add this 5th year of eligibility, you're also not adding scholarships. If they added a fifth year of eligibility and then just also added 20 scholarships and went back up to 125 or something like that, this wouldn't be as big a deal, because essentially your rosters could just absorb all of those 5th year seniors. But they are not doing that. And it's a tricky one. I do have a question from chat that I want to address before we get too far because this is of a previous topic. Keith McGovern asks, do you think the Alston guy that had a big catch in the Pop-Tarts Bowl could have a big year? I don't know because he is in the transfer portal. Isaiah Alston transferred last week as well. So he just wasn't able to crack up the depth chart. So he is in the portal now. So Isaiah Alston may have a big year, but it will not be for Iowa State, unfortunately. Back to the 5th year of eligibility. If you were going to increase scholarships, you could absorb those seniors and recruiting could stay largely in the same neighborhood. But when you're just staying at 105 scholarships and now you're adding an entire extra class of guys that are just sticking around. So it's now you call them, you have seniors, maybe you call them graduates or something like that, whatever, 5th year seniors, whatever you want to call them. That's going to change recruiting patterns because suddenly you have a whole bunch of guys that are staying on the team that are just not leaving. So the year after this gets passed, you suddenly have a big problem because you've already got a 2026 recruiting class. And now you have guys that can come back for another year of eligibility. If this gets passed this summer, Tyler Miller would be able to come back for another year because he would just be given another year of eligibility. Would he choose to come back? I don't know. Is 7 years in college too much? Probably. But, you already have your 2026 class. So, which means that either you have a bunch of freshmen that are going to be coming to campus that don't actually have a roster spot. So they're going to immediately transfer, or you have a whole bunch of 5th year seniors that, they've already graduated with 4. And now you have all these 5th year seniors. There's roster. So they need a roster spot somewhere. Either it's going to be on the current team, or those seniors are going to have to hit the portal and go find someplace else. The problem is that every other team is also going to have a bunch of 5th year seniors that they don't have roster spots for. So you have all of these young guys and old guys that aren't going to have a place on the team and nowhere to go because all of a sudden you've introduced an extra class worth of players straight into the player pool in the NCAA. It's a huge problem. It's going to cause massive issues, and it takes away roster spots from guys. The balance of college football was great when you had 4 years to play 5. You could plan on certain guys leaving early. You could plan on them leaving after 4 years, whatever it is. And that's what it is. But now you have a whole bunch of guys sticking around that you can't get enough snaps for. So now they're going to leave because that's the culture in college football now is that if you can't get all the snaps you want right away, you just got to go leave and find somebody else that'll give you the snaps. This all trickles down. Now, does this mean that you have more guys leave and teams in the G5 get stronger because more experienced guys have to drop down? Potentially. But it all keeps funneling down. You have guys that'll drop down from P5 to G5, G5 down to FCS, FCS down to D2, D2 down to D3, and all the way down. And then all of a sudden, you have a whole bunch of guys that have transferred down, and this is already happening. But now it would get worse because you have an entire extra class in there. You have all these guys transfer down, and then all of a sudden, all these D3 guys, they have no place to go because they are at the bottom of the totem pole. Leaving their team in D3 to transfer out means they got to find a D3 or maybe an NAIA school or something like that. And that's it. There's no level below them besides NAIA or JUCO. But JUCO is also an interesting one because now JUCO years don't count towards your NCAA eligibility. So you have guys that are more than willing to go to JUCO for a couple of years because they're still going to get 4 years in the NCAA after they leave JUCO. So now JUCO roster spots are already taken up and probably by potentially pretty talented players that just needed a couple of years of snaps to get ready to go to college. There's not enough room in college football for all of these players. There's just not. So now instead of taking classes of 20, 25 guys, including high school and transfer portal, you're talking about, class sizes getting reduced down to 10, 15, at the most. there's not enough room. So all of a sudden, when you're chopping it down 10 to 15 instead of 20, 25, that you're cutting class sizes in half, basically. So now half of the amount of athletes get an opportunity to play college sports. That sucks. Like it's unfortunate because the more athletes you can have in college, the better. The more people that you can get every year to go in and be able to play college sports is good. It's absolutely good. Adding a fifth year helps almost nobody, including the athletes that would take advantage of it. It doesn't really even help them. Except for there might be a small group of guys that are good enough to make good money in college, but not good enough to make it to the NFL and make good money. So it's beneficial for them to just stay in college as long as they can, collect the paychecks as long as they can before they're done and they have to go work, in the professional world. There's a group of guys that probably fall into that, but for the most part, this is not really going to help much of anybody. It's not going to help the pros or the guys that are going to be pros because they're going to be leaving. They're going to be leaving early anyways. And it doesn't really help the lower guys that aren't making a lot of NIL money because now their roster spots are getting eaten up by guys that want to transfer down to get playing time. This doesn't help anybody. I think this is a terrible thing. It's going to mess everything up right away, and then it's going to continue to stay messed up for different reasons. The COVID year did a ton of damage to roster construction in college football, and it enabled the transfer portal to be as terrible as it has been. And if you add this fifth year without amending transfer rules, now, if you amend transfer rules so that way maybe you get the first transfer free, but everything else after that is a year, more people will stick around. If I were the college football czar, I would go the first transfer is free, and then you can transfer for free anytime your head coach leaves. If your head coach leaves, you can transfer. Otherwise, you get one free transfer in college, and every time after that is a full sit out year. And it's not like midseason transfer where you sit out. It's you have to sit out a full season if you transfer. And I think that would keep people in their place longer. Would that fix the problem? Probably not, because now you just have guys not moving and sitting on rosters instead of moving and taking up roster spots. But at least that does more to help the lower division athletes that don't have a place to go down. That helps them keep some of their roster spots, because then if you don't have a mountain of players transferring down and pushing guys out the bottom, you can at least adjust this through smaller recruiting classes from high school, which again kind of sucks because you have a bunch of guys that would ordinarily have the opportunity to play college football that just won't anymore because there just isn't place on any roster. But at least then you're not kicking out people that have already earned a spot to be on a college football team. I don't know. This causes lots of problems. There's this to the blame of many people, people that should have made these decisions, made different decisions 40 years ago. This is not a new problem. It's not a problem that was caused 3 years ago or 5 years ago or when the transfer portal started or when NIL started or any of that. It's a symptom of old problems and old bad decisions that should have been changed a long time ago. But it's where we're at right now, unfortunately. And it's just we're just going to have to deal with it. And maybe revenue sharing changes how this happens, and it changes the velocity of transfers around college football. So guys aren't jumping around so much because they have guaranteed paycheck coming in, and schools frankly just can't afford to just toss out a ton of NIL money for something, because all these NIL firms right now, all these NIL collectives will be, functionally just become marketing arms instead of fundraising arms. So that changes things a little bit, because now you have a baseline pay. You essentially have baseline pay for everybody, everybody in college football and basketball. Probably not a lot for the non-revenue sports, I would imagine. Most non-revenue sports probably get little to none. But I don't know. It's a wild world right now, and hopefully we'll have more clarity, by the time August 1 rolls around, we should have some more clarity for what's going on because revenue sharing will have kicked in and we will have some clarity on the house settlement and what's all going on with this. But right now it's just kind of it's up in the air and we're just gonna hang on for the ride until college football gets here in the middle of August with Iowa State and Kansas State kicking off in Dublin. So appreciate everybody joining in this week. We're gonna wrap her up for this week, but appreciate everyone joining in on YouTube and on X. If you're watching on Twitter, really appreciate if you go over to YouTube and to the Iowa State Voice of College Football YouTube page, give us a like and a subscription and comment on the video if you've got thoughts. If we get good comments on YouTube videos week to week, I'll bring them up on the show and address them if we get funny comments or whatever. But everybody's appreciate you all tuning in. We will see you all guys all again next week here at Iowa State on the Voice of College Football Network.